I know you. You're that
jaywalking punk anarchist.
Hello, this is the Radical Reviewer. Now, a few weeks ago, the YouTuber Kathrin and I came out with a video about how we were radicalized by our shitty work experiences, and you seem to enjoy that video quite a bit. So, Kathrin and I decided that, for a few different reasons, we'd like to revisit this subject. First, I'd like to say that these one-off stories, although they are certainly emblematic of the larger problems, they do not explain the larger problems. I guess that Kathrin did a better job of making the connections between her personal stories and the problems with capitalism overall in her section of the previous video, but I'd like to explain it plainly here by comparing two stories. One is a story that I did tell in the previous video. It was from when I worked fast food and the manager illegally dumped old oil down the drain. It's a one-off story about a particular event that points to a greater flaw, which is that capitalism doesn't really have any incentive to care about the environment. Now here's a story that I didn't tell. There was a single mother with 2 kids who worked at that same fast food place for like 2 decades. This mother had no car. Having a car was required to become a store manager. And even if it wasn't, because she had no car, she couldn't travel to the mandatory training or to other stores, which is what's required when you're a store manager. Sure, she could have saved for a car, but perhaps it was more practical or even just easier to buy things for her and her daughters in the here and now. Not only that, but I mean, if you have a car, you know that they are total money sinks. Changing the oil, getting gas, changing the tires, getting insurance, frequent repairs, and all of that. What about getting a different job, a better paying job? Well, as a single mother with 2 kids, she probably could have got a boatload of financial aid, but to learn what? For what profession? Would she even have the time and energy to study? Would she remember enough from high school to test into college level classes? Would she end up with a bunch of student debt anyway? She could take the risk, but it's a calculated risk. I'm basically critiquing the duh, just move, or duh, just learn to code arguments that come up when people talk about the struggles of getting out of poverty. Now, what makes this second story different from the first? Well, this story isn't about a particular event. It's not something shocking or illegal. It's not out of the ordinary. In fact, it's incredibly ordinary. So I didn't put it in the video. Yet in many ways, this second story better illustrates that even outside of shocking one-off stories such as a manager illegally dumping old oil down the drain, even when capitalism is working as it should, it still leaves people in desperate poverty with dead-end jobs. That said, I do think that these one-off stories are great for building empathy and solidarity through shared experiences, and explaining how problems in capitalism directly impact people's lives. In the previous video, I asked you folks to tell me your stories about being radicalized from your work experiences. And here are just a few of my favorites.
I also worked for Target, and while my neighbour and her son were sleeping on the floor and neatly stacking their clean clothes on the floor because they couldn't afford furniture, my boss was tossing dresses and other furniture into the compactor. When I mentioned my neighbour and asked if I could bring something home for her, I was told that it was not possible. But this same person was seen on more than one occasion taking whatever furniture they wanted for themselves. I was homeless for a good chunk of my teenhood, and that was certainly radicalizing. Worked at a retail department store for 3 years to pay my way through school. I worked in the stockroom and would similarly listen to music podcasts. We had walkie-talkies so that employees would just call in what they needed and I would prepare it for them. One day I heard on the walkie-talkie about getting a shoplifter. I ignored it, but later found out that 4 employees had pinned a man down because he had stolen some short pants. They all bragged about how tough they were and even laughed and mocked the man who had said he had asthma and couldn't breathe as they pinned him down. I had a hard time socializing with those employees afterwards after seeing how terribly they had treated that man who had shoplifted. Worked for a restaurant and made it to shift lead, started to believe the meritocracy myth a little too much. resented co-workers for not working as hard as me, and drank heavily from stress. I outed a higher manager for a sexual assault outside of work. The owner's reaction was poor, and it took other staff threatening to quit in order to get the guy fired. My relationship with the owners was never the same after. I hit my pay cap and saw no promotion in sight. They continued to make poor decisions, cut the kitchen's pay and commission for deliveries, capped driver percentages, and put all cash tips on paychecks. One owner had a reputation for throwing things in the kitchen, making inappropriate remarks, and being a creep. The only reason I stayed so long was because I had been on probation and feared violating the terms by not having a job, and after a period of incarceration, it was the first place that took me back on immediate notice. I used to believe in all the conservative capitalists' beliefs that when I started working in a butcher shop as an apprentice butcher, I realized how easy it is to abuse employees and how the companies only care about making more money. They don't give a shit about you. In about a year and a half, I have radically changed the way I viewed the world.
If you'd like to hear more stories like these, look at the comment section of the other video, link in the description. I hearted almost all of the comments referring to stories about being radicalized by shitty work experiences, so they're pretty easy to find. Now, unfortunately, not all the comments in the previous video were so great. Kathrin and I noticed a troubling trend: sexism in the comment section. Here are some examples. My ears started to bleed when I heard that feminist dumbfuck whine about all these fictional scenarios. In capitalism, if you don't like the product, don't buy it. If you don't like the employer, don't work there. Easy. Stop whining about things that you willfully choose to accept. For fuck's sake, communist propaganda thwarted. Really hard to upvote. Brit Karen was so annoying. Seriously, women taking jobs from men because they are women? Jesus, move to Belarus. Nothing will change, but no one will understand you to be offended. Hashtag Islam is right about women, just read the Quran. This woman is absolutely insufferable. I mentally checked out once I heard the lady start talking about gender inequality in the workplace. This is starting to become a really dogmatic opinion on the left that stems from lack of life experience or the willingness to see another perspective. Ever since I was a kid, the only gender inequality I've seen is being paid the same as the women who don't have to do half the shit that I do. As a teenager in Burger King, I would get the closing shift on a school night and had to clean up the store on top of prepping the food and making the orders, while the girls would just work the window and flirt with the manager for better schedules. Working in the hospital as a college kid, I would have to do all the labor-intensive work that involved walking and picking up heavy shit, while all the girls got to sit on their ass and do data entry. Even now, as a grown man, I'm the manager of a team of 20 men and women at a tech company, and half of our female employees get privileges that our male employees don't get, despite our male employees being the higher performers. This is anecdotal, of course, but I'm sorry. As a man of color, I always find white women complaining about workplace inequality the most infuriating, simply due to the fact that they benefit from it the most. Like, where the fuck do you guys think the Karen meme came from? Hell, even in the military, women and men of the same rank get paid the same, despite the women having easier standards and easier/less dangerous assignments. I know I won't make too many friends saying this, but women like this lady in this video are the main beneficiaries of workplace inequality, who have the nerve to complain about hardships like as if they are the sole victims of this oppressive system. We all are victims in different ways, but don't get your head so far up your own ass not to realize the order of this shit. Class, then race, then gender. That's how shit rolls downhill. This probably would have been a good video if it wasn't for the woman talking about non-binary misogyny and victim blaming. It's literally unshareable now. If I shared this video anywhere, I'd get banned for being a stupid simp. Now, if you've been following politics online lately, there's been a lot of talk about class reductionism and misunderstanding intersectionality, and these comments are just dripping with that mindset. Kathrin, what do you make of all this?
So I think something that people often forget is that patriarchy preceded capitalism, but the very foundations upon which capitalism was built off of putting women into a subservient role. During the 15th to 18th century, female subjugation was used as a tool for instituting capitalism through forcing women into unpaid reproductive labour and unpaid domestic labour at home, decriminalising the rape of poor women to undermine class solidarity, perpetuating rape culture to oppress rebellious women from bringing down the economic order, institutionalising prostitution as a means of diffusing workers' protests. So capitalism relies on this depreciation of domestic work, which allows it to make huge savings. Patriarchy is imposing gendered norms that capitalism is selling us, aka objectification and sexualization of women's bodies serves a consumer purpose. And where women have received more rights, it's often just been about maximizing production, consumption, and profits. The capitalist system needs sexism. It needs women to feel objectified and sexualized and inferior because it needs women to accept the unpaid labor of child-rearing, domestic labor, and to prevent them from organizing for better conditions. Obviously, I'm only addressing the tip of the iceberg here. There are so many other ways in which patriarchy and capitalism intersect with other forms of oppression. I'd highly recommend reading Silvia Federici's book, Caliban and the Witch, that goes into all of this in so much more detail.
As a final note, I really appreciated Kathrin helping me with the previous video because although I've had several shitty work experiences, there is a lot of sexism, misogyny, harassment, and such that I've never experienced, despite how common it is. It was really great to have someone with those perspectives and experiences share them for the video. And you know what? People noticed. For the final comment, I'd like to read someone's comment connecting with Kathrin's stories. Honestly, the most unpleasant, soulless people I've ever known in my life were fucking retail managers. The sexual harassment shit Kathrin is relating is for fucking real. As a cashier at a prevalent US hardware chain, I had a man in a Rascal and a D-Day hat tell me to take off all my clothes and get up on the counter to dance for him. I was 22. There was no point in saying anything to management. At the time, I just figured it, like all the other shitty sexual crap at that place, was just par for the course. As one coworker put it after I'd mentioned it in the break room, well, you're a chick, what do you expect? And so it goes. Yeah, I mean, I think class is probably the most pressing of the inequalities, the most severe. However, we need to strive for solidarity and compassion and understanding of our fellow workers. And that means understanding intersectionality. Understanding how race, gender, ability, sexual orientation, and all of that drastically impacts a person's class standing and how they are treated along class lines. Let's build a better understanding of intersectionality. Let's build better empathy and solidarity. Let's be better about this kind of stuff. Anyway, as always, I'd like to thank my wonderful patrons. Your tremendous support has allowed me to get dog insurance and to support other creators I couldn't otherwise support and things like that, which is really awesome. I appreciate you folks a lot. And if you like what I do here and you'd like to support the show, you can go to patreon.com/Radical Reviewer. And if you're interested in radical theory or whatever, you can get your radical reviews here with the Radical Reviewer. Thanks for watching.